Okay, right. Okay, so the beginnings of America. So you have European settlements. This kind of gives you an idea of where everybody was. Okay, green is Spain. Okay, meaning Spain came over here and colonized those areas. Red are the English colonies, and beige are the French colonies. Okay. The first established colony was over here in Florida. It's St. Augustine. It was established by the Spanish. It was for gold, glory, and God. So glory for Spain, gold for the people who invested, and God for the monarch. So again, first places that really were explored: Spain, Texas, or not Spain, Texas, Florida, Texas, and parts of Mexico. The French came down through the Hudson River into the Great Lakes system and explored a lot of what is now the Midwest and Canada. The English came through the East Coast, primarily around North Carolina, Virginia, Pennsylvania, and up further north, New England, Massachusetts. So probably most famous for Sir Walter Raleigh. That's what our capital is named after. The Lost Colony, who John White was their leader, left for 2 years, came back, and it was gone with nothing but Croatan carved into a tree. Okay. The Virginia Company, a lot of these settlements were invested, and we'll get into what they are later. But the Joint Stock Company were the ones who financed the Virginia Company. Okay, this is where John Smith and Pocahontas and all that came from. So they financed the Virginia Company, who established Jamestown in 1607. John Smith is the leader. He's the military man. What he realizes pretty quickly is that a lot of the people who came over were businessmen and not workers. Okay, they weren't used to hard labor, so they did not want to work very much. And people started running out of food. So starving time hit, and he came up with the philosophy: no work, no food. If you were not going to help with the labor, you would not eat. As more colonists came in and adhered to this, the colony ended up growing and becoming pretty successful. It's the first democratic government in the New World in North America. House of Burgesses get established. It's the first government in Jamestown. Virginia was a form of representative democracy. The biggest thing about Jamestown, they used tobacco as a cash crop. The people who were really famous for it are John Rolfe, who kind of introduced it, and then Pocahontas, who he ended up marrying. The headright system, basically this is what incentivized a lot of people to come over. As colonists, you were promised 50 acres if you came over. So you were promised land. So you could go from being somebody in England who had almost nothing to somebody over here who became a landowner. The other thing that you could do is you could come over as an indentured servant, meaning that you worked 5 to 7 years of service to whoever you came over under. And then after those 5 to 7 years, then you would end up getting your headright system. You would get your 50 acres. But that indentured servitude was in exchange for your passage over. It was very expensive to cross from Europe to America. This is also where the first slaves were imported in Jamestown. The first rebellion, there was an Indian dispute on the front line or the frontier. Colonists asked for protection from the Virginia government, but were denied. This first skirmish is called Bacon's Rebellion. Nathaniel Bacon led the frontier colonists in a rebellion against the Virginia government because they would not protect them from the Native Americans. His big thing, which is a theme that you will see throughout the British colonies until the colonies gained their independence, is taxation without representation. Okay, showed signs of discontent with leadership because they expected to be protected by their government. If you remember from chapter 1, that's one of the primary functions of government is protection. Okay, the Pilgrims were also called separatist because they wanted to practice their own religion. They wanted to be separate from the Church of England, or a lot of people call it the Anglican Church. They established Plymouth, Massachusetts in 1620. As they come over on their famous ship, the Mayflower, they come up with the Mayflower Compact. Okay, they set up a direct democracy for the colony. If you remember, direct democracy means that everybody gets to vote on everything. Okay, it leads to the tradition of town meetings where everybody meets and gets to have a say before everything's put to a vote. The colony struggled but received Native American help to grow crops. This is where we kind of get the idea of the first Thanksgiving. Squanto is the name of the Native American who kind of bridged the gap and allowed for there to be a lot of help because he had learned some English from traders who'd come over prior to the Pilgrims. William Bradford is pretty famous for writing his novel of Plymouth Plantation. Okay, the Puritans wanted to rid the English church of Catholic traditions. They were led by a Reverend named John Winthrop. His idea was city on a hill, be an example to the world. They settled in Massachusetts. They have a strong connection between church and state. So instead of what our modern ideas of a separation of church and state, they had the idea of it being kind of falling under one, which is the way the Church of England was. The Church of England was under the King of England. They had pretty strict adherence to Puritan rules. They had a very disciplined lifestyle. They were very, very strict rules.